In this video, we're going to review functions. Now, if you recall, functions are a way to encapsulate your code to make it more flexible. So, let's first define some simple functions so we can get started. First, we're going to define a function, main, which will be our main function when we start our program with. We'll eventually always have one when I show you some other stuff, but here, first we'll do print hello. And you've seen this. Then we come down here and we'll say main. And it will run our little program. Whoops. And I forgot a colon. So here you see when we run it, we got our main function down here. And it doesn't run this. We just define our function. When we run it, main will then call our function and print out hello. Okay? So that's a very simple procedure. But what you could do is also have more complex ones. Let's define add. And we're going to this time let it have two parameters. Parameters are values we pass in that the function can operate on. So we're going to say a equals x plus y. And then we're going to say return a. And what this will do, it'll define a function that takes two parameters. We send in two values. It's going to add them, and then it's going to return the value from the function. So now we could say result equals add x comma, or 3 comma 5, right? And then we will say print result. And now if we run main, it's down here. 3 plus 5 equals 8, just like we'd expect. Okay, so notice now we have one function calling another function. Now, when we pass in parameters, what it does is it takes this parameter and puts it in here. But we can also use variables. Let's say, for example, let's say a equals 5 and b equals 11, or 22, why not? We can then say add a, b, and what this will do is it'll take the value of a and copy it into x, and b and copy it into y. So now if we run it, we should see that it works still. Although it's still printing the wrong numbers, because here we put 3 plus 5. So let's change this and make it say a plus b. And now when we run it, we get 6 plus 22 equals 28. So basically, we have two types of functions we can talk about. We have functions that return a value, okay, and functions that just do something. So let's say we have a function called print header, okay, and it takes no parameters, and we'll say print hello there, welcome to your program. Okay, and then we could have another statement here that's we hope you like it here. So here we can say print header, and now when we run it, we get hello you like it here. And try running it again. So again, this is a void function because it doesn't return anything, and this is a value returning function that does return something. Okay, so we can go into a little more details. In these functions, the name should specify what the function actually does. This top of the function, this header, is what's called the first line of the function. It's also called the signature. A block is the set of statements here. Okay. And when you call a function, the interpreter jumps to where that function is. So from here, it would jump to main. And then when it's done, it'll return back to here. Okay? And that's called the function and the return. Now, we almost always have a main function, and that is defined as the center point or beginning of your program. It is very common to have that, and almost every program has some variant in it, regardless of language, actually. As mentioned before, we can have a function that does nothing. Right, so here, instead of calling main, if we call stub, and then save it and run it, we'll notice it does absolutely nothing. Okay? But you can use that to stub it out so to call it while you fill in other stuff. Alright? So let's put our main back. Now, each method could have its own variables. Notice main here has its own variables. Okay? And here we could have it, and here we could have our own variables. We have a here. Notice that a here and a here are not the same. Variables are scoped local to the function. At the end of this function, a goes away, as does x and y. Now here's something to see. Okay? What if we change our code here to say x equals x plus y and return x? Or, I'm sorry, let's change this around a little bit. Let's say a equals, well, let's make this not return anything, right? And we'll say x equals x plus y. And here, when we come out, we'll print a and b and see our results, right? And so here we expect the results. Let's say this is 3, and this is 5 again. So we should expect the result to be 8. And we run it. But it's none, because the function doesn't return anything. So what if we do this? And we print out A. 3 plus 5 equals 3. You notice that A is unchanged? That's because in Python we pass by value, meaning it copies it. It doesn't change the original value. The only time that's different is with a list, but we'll come back to that. Okay, so remember, it doesn't change the value. Okay? Now, parameters are just values we can pass in. They have strings, but they're copied. They're one way. They're in only. Return is the only way to get them out. However, if you want to return multiple values, you can. So let's say we want to have a function that returns a was. Okay. Say we have a function that we want to add 1 and add 2 to numbers. Yes, it's contrived. First, second, and it's going to add 1 to each of these. So what we'll say here is first plus equals 1, second plus equals 1, and then what we're going to say is return first, second. And then here, when we call it in our main function, which we have coming out, we can say, let's get rid of all this. We can say uptick 3, 5, and here we would then say first num, second num equals, and so now, and then we can say print first num, comma, second num, and let's see what happens. Here we get 4 and 6. Okay, because what we told it this time is return a list of values, or it's called a tuple actually, a tuple of values, first and second. But when we get it back, we have to assign it to a set of variables. Now, if we did this, right, instead, it won't work. Oops, oh wait, let's get rid of X. Oh, I didn't say that. What happens here is it actually assigns a whole tuple to first null. Okay? So therefore, it'll still print correctly. But if you want to use the variables individually, you can separate them. So one of the last things we're going to go over is, if you notice, in our code, we happen to have a main that's called outside of any methods. While that's great that we can call functions outside of any methods, the problem is when we have a library, we don't want to have the library start executing code that's not in a method or a function. Function and method interchangeable. So what we can do is this. Let's go over to our library, which I shrunk down a bit. And here we will say, if name equals main, then do this. So now, if we come back to our function class where we're importing it, here you'll see that we can also do the same thing. So if name equals main, then call main, and there we go. So now let's run this and see if it works. Okay, and it worked. Now, notice though what didn't happen is here, this print, and let's add some text here. Print. Okay. So now, we run this using that as a library, for example. It works fine, but notice we didn't see this because this isn't main. But if we run this directly, we do, because in here, if you run this directly, it's main. But if you use a library somewhere else and it has this around it, it won't run the code underneath the main. So that's one of the reasons we always put our functions in a main and take it from there. So with that in mind, this is how to use functions. We'll also do some more sophisticated examples later on.